What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Jake Podger. I am your host tonight for our AFC East Summit show. A lot of stuff to dive into. We're going to talk a little bit about the AFC NFC Championship games, talk about some moves that our teams should make in the offseason, whether that's through the draft, free agency, or just re-signing someone. And then, talk about some other news going around the NFL. More to follow after this. Hello, everybody. It is great to be back here on the AFC East Summit. As I mentioned, my name is Jake Podger with Nickel City Mafia. I am the Buffalo Bills representative on our channel. I rotate in with Brett and Sean, who you guys will see on our Red, White, and Ruthless show. They took a little vacation this past Saturday. I think they were just trying to get their emotions in check. It's been a tough couple of weeks for us Bills fans. And, fellas, it's crazy. I was thinking about this yesterday, and it was a good point brought up. I don't know who brought up. Maybe it was Brett. So first off, from that 2018 quarterback class, we have the only quarterback remaining going to the Super Bowl, Sam Darnold, as a backup for the San Francisco 49ers. It's wild, man. But I'll tell you what, that class was very well represented in this year's playoffs. And, boy, it's exciting to see. Even if the guys were, eliminated early on, such as Baker Mayfield. And actually, Baker got a win. He was eliminated in the divisional round. My guy, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson this past week, which we'll get into that game a little bit. But very good representation from that 2018 draft class. Josh Rosen is out there somewhere, probably just watching and always wishing that he had a better environment around him. But here we are, fellas. Hope you both are doing well. I'm joined tonight by Anthony, our Jets representative, and Dolphin Keith, our Dolphins representative. Chris, MIA, he went and got himself a motorcycle tonight. He's trying to get that all figured out and registered, and hopefully he's ready for trivia next week. Yes, we are going to bring back some trivia, so wanted to make that announcement too. Very excited for that. But fellas, how we doing tonight? Anthony, I'm going to start with you. It's been a little while since we last chatted. What's new in Jets land?
Be honest with you, not a whole lot. There's just rumors of there's rumors that we're going to get a new wide receiver coach, which is yay. They kept most of the rest of the coaches. Yep. So that's about it. There's very little, there's no news in Jets land at all. I guess the only thing that's happening right now, the speculation on where Zach Wilson's going to trade it to, because apparently they did tell him that they're going to go ahead and trade him in the offseason. What's funny is that a random report came out earlier on this week, and I wanted to bring up to Chris that Mac Jones contacted a member of the Jets staff and said that he really liked the way that they handled Zach Wilson compared to what they did to him. And I just
interesting. Okay.
Wow. Just what a random report. But at the same time, some of these random leak reports seem to 3 months later come out to be true. So that's one of those ones I kind of maybe tend to believe.
Any connections there with
the Zach Wilson thing was a dumpster fire. What's up?
Are there any connections through the Jets to Mac Jones? Any Alabama coaches, any former coaches of his that are with the organization? That's
no. There's no connections. It's just that when they demoted Zach to third string, they at least told him. Yeah. Mac Jones apparently found out 90 minutes before kickoff.
A lot of mind games going on there in New England. I wish we had Chris on so we could talk a little bit more about that. But that's just
you do.
That's the Belichick way right there. He likes to keep his guys on their toes. Basically, just prepare like you're going to play, and if you don't, at least you're prepared to go into the game because the New England quarterback situation this year. I mean, basically, if you were a quarterback on that roster not named Malik Cunningham, you were going to get into the game. So pretty incredible development there. Very interesting story, Anthony. I hadn't heard that, so thanks for the info there.
We'll see how this pans out over the next couple of weeks or so. Obviously, apparently the Jets promised Zach Wilson during the season, hey, look, we know we did you wrong, so we're going to go ahead and trade you in the offseason. But we don't know what's going to happen with Mac Jones because they've got a brand new head coach. Head coach, I don't even think he was on the roster for them. So or Gerard Mayo, I don't even know that he was on the roster for them this past year. So I don't know if he has any.
Yeah, so he
was the linebacker
I will
coach?
say this.
Yeah.
I will say this about Gerard Mayo. He has been a Patriot lifer ever since
Really?
he was drafted there in 2008. Wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he played until about 2015. He retires. Obviously got some Super Bowl rings. Lucky him.
Yeah.
And then he came in as an assistant, intern coach, almost, if you will.
Quality control guy or whatever.
Yeah, 2019, I think. And then ever since then, he's been with the organization, has slowly taken steps up. He was the linebacker this past year. But, sometimes that works out where you have a position coach that moves up to the big ranks. We saw it with Antonio Pierce, too, in Las Vegas. He was the linebackers coach there. And for whatever reason, it seems like guys that recently played or have played in those big games, the players just have a natural respect for them. So it might work out. I do hope it does work out for New England. Not too much, not so much so that they're outdoing our teams. But, I like Gerard Mayo. I'm rooting for him. I like seeing moves like that, especially within the organization promoting upwards. So it's nice to see.
Yeah, no, you are. I'm curious what they're going to do in the draft because it looks like they might be going quarterback, and you're not going to keep Mac Jones if that's the case. So there might be a few of these 2019 quarterback guys. There's the only one of them is going to be on the team that was drafted and would have been is going to be Trevor Lawrence. So the other four of them are going to be playing for different teams. Crazy.
That is pretty wild, man. That is pretty wild. Well, let's go to the chat here. It looks like we got some folks joining us tonight. Tom, shout out to you, sir. Always great to see you. One of our members of the channel. We appreciate the hell out of everything you do for us, young man. The other member of our channel, by the way, is on the show tonight, Dolphin Keith. So thank you guys both for your ever-loving support. We do appreciate it, and always great having the both of you on our shows. Mike in the chat there. What's up, gentlemen? Must be having a heat wave in Chicago. Anthony sporting the tank top. Anthony, you got some traps going on there, brother. What's going on?
Getting the guns going.
Dude, no offense, but deceiving muscles on your body. You're jocked. You are freaking jocked.
Yeah. So I started going to the gym again about 4 months ago. Three and a half months ago or so, and so slowly building back up. I have the world's worst metabolism though. It takes me 4 months before I start losing a pound. And 2 weeks ago, I was 5 pounds heavier than I am now. It takes me 3 months, I don't lose anything at all. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks, 5 pounds come off. 2 more weeks, I'm expecting another 4 or 5 pounds. And it's been like this a couple of times in the past. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah.
Dude, you look great, man. You look great. Keep it up.
Appreciate it.
My dad coming in the chat. Keith just got in from a cruise and 5-day stay in Miami. The Dolphins fans didn't like my Josh Allen jersey. Yeah, he did mention that. I
think part of that's jealousy.
Yeah, I would say so, right? Although Tua is the starting quarterback in the Pro Bowl this week. And Josh Allen, I don't know if he just declined the invite, but guys like Gardner Minshew and CJ Stroud, which I think is deserving, but Gardner Minshew, I like Gardner a lot, but I guess it's not as bad as the Snoop Huntley Pro Bowl selection last year, right? So very interesting. Yeah. Some replacements in the Pro Bowl being announced, as I just mentioned there. But Mike, they definitely had a really good time. They went on a cruise. They went out of Miami. They spent some time in Miami, as you mentioned. So, I think outside of them not being able to watch that Bills-Chiefs game, which is probably for the best because it was just heartache at the end, they had a blast. Tom, yes, I do have a new hat on. I do want to pretty fired up. I think I can finally say this out in public, but we're having another girl, so I'm very excited about that.
Nice.
The wife is 15 weeks along right now, so we're not out of the woods, I guess, per se, but we're excited about it happening. And talk about battling through some adversity, guys. I don't know how pregnant women do it. She says she just sweats randomly, and she's gaining weight in places that she's never gained weight before. I mean, she's already gone through this once before, but yeah, God bless them. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. Sean, Welcome to the chat, sir. Great to see you as always. I knew Keith was wrong about the Bills all season. Pro Bowl doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I mean, we sort of alluded to that, and it's unfortunate. It's not what it used to be. Still cool, still a good honor, probably good for these players in terms of getting some incentives in their contracts. So always love to see that. But I think we're all caught up. Keith, I want to talk to you. Anthony and I were talking about this a little bit before the show started. And just before we get into talking, AFC and NFC championship, I wanted to ask you, because Anthony talked about some things going on with the Jets offseason. What is going on with the defensive coordinator spot in Miami? Are they hiring Brandon Staley? What are they doing?
Well, I know that they interviewed Brandon Staley, but they've been interviewing a bunch of guys. They interviewed Leslie Frazier the other day.
I did see that.
Former Bills coordinator. They interviewed Anthony Weaver today, the Ravens defensive line coach. They've interviewed a bunch of guys. I think that they're just really trying to, turn over every stone here. Brandon Staley would be the obvious hire, right? He's worked under Vic Fangio, so there's not going to be much of an adjustment as far as scheme goes. But, who of us could say that he brought out the best in the Chargers defense this season or throughout his entire tenure? You can't. The strength of that team was their offense. And when their offense started to falter, the entire team started to falter. You would expect a better defense, especially when he's working with guys like Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Derwin James. He had some real heavy hitters on that defense, and it never seemed like he fully got the best out of any of those guys. So, Brandon Staley wouldn't be my choice. I think that the Dolphins kind of need a complete change in scheme, and I wouldn't have said that at the end of the season if they were sticking with Vic Fangio. Mm-hmm. But stories have come out about Vic Fangio's rigidness within the organization, not letting position coaches talk to the players, not letting position coaches kind of implement their own way of doing things. He kind of came off as the crotchety old man in the building, and that's not what you want, especially when you've got a guy like Mike McDaniel as the head coach. And that's partially an indictment on Mike McDaniel because he should have kind of nipped that in the bud a little bit. But that's partially an indictment on Vic Fangio. And now the reports coming out, the Dolphins players didn't want to work for Vic Fangio. And I don't buy all that. I think it was just a bad fit from Jump Street. Vic Fangio wanted to be in Philadelphia. Sean may be right. It could be Staley by default, but he wouldn't be my choice. They interviewed Leslie Frazier. I would like that. I think this staff needs an older guy with a little bit more gravitas, a little bit more a guy who was a former head coach. I think that would be really good for this team, just to get an older guy like Leslie Frazier in there. And he's also really good at collaborating with other groups. So I think he'd be a nice hire for the Dolphins. But they are turning over every stone. And I think there's more interviews scheduled for tomorrow. We'll see where this goes. Yeah, I mean,
Sean's saying it's not the it's the player's softness.
I mean, there's something to that. There is something to that, I'm sure. But Jalen Ramsey is a guy who's won a Super Bowl. Jalen Ramsey is a guy who's won a Super Bowl. He knows what it takes, and he didn't get along with Vic Fangio. Javon Holland was a leader on this defense, and he's an up-and-coming safety in this league. He didn't get along with Vic Fangio. You can call it the Salk generation, but this is the generation. And maybe just maybe Vic Fangio isn't the kind of guy for this generation. Maybe the game has passed him by a little bit. I would make the same argument for Bill Belichick, honestly. I think that's part of the reason why he doesn't have a job right now, is that the game has kind of just passed him by a little bit. And I think you need the younger guys who are, we're not going to agree with that one on that one, Sean. Javon Holland's a damn good safety. But maybe you need a guy with guys with a little more give.
He's just defending his quarterback, though, Sean.
Yeah.
I mean, I do the same thing, you know?
Yeah, I love you, Sean. Love you, Sean. Don't always love your takes, but I love you. No, you know,
I don't know about where'd you hear this? I don't know about this.
I think Sean's just having a go of it right now.
Yeah,
Give him a lot of
might be.
attention. He's just
You
running
never
with it.
know. You never know. You never know.
No, you need a guy who's going to get the most out of these players and out of the secondary, to be more specific, because you've got heavy hitters like Jalen Ramsey back there, like Javon Holland. Cam Smith was our second round rookie. He didn't see the field under Vic Fangio, and a lot of people questioned that. You need to get the most out of him. You know, there's a lot of talent on this defense that felt untapped this year under Vic Fangio, and you need a defensive coordinator who's going to tap into all that talent.
I think I was going to say, I think you hit the nail on the head where a lot of it had to do with a scheme fit. I mean, I alluded to it a couple times when we talked about Cam Smith, that like he was drafted as a man cover corner, as a slot, as like a tight end eraser, that kind of thing, and they just don't do that under Fangio. Yeah. Like Fangio seemed like a weird scheme fit to begin with because he's his own guy.
They went from Josh Boyer, who was like
heavy man, to like a guy that didn't really want to do man, that wanted to do his Fangio defense. And like they struggled for the first half of the season. Honestly, you guys played your best defense at the end of the year when you're blitzing because you didn't have any, you couldn't get any pressure anymore. Yeah. Like you played your best football when he just couldn't be Fangio anymore, and he had to be like a more, meat and potatoes, Belichick kind of style coordinator.
And so getting into what Sean was saying about Ron Jaworski, his report. I listened to it too. But the thing you have to understand about Ron Jaworski, he's a former Eagles quarterback. He is going to spin everything as a positive for the Eagles.
What did Jaws say, by the way? Can you recap it for us?
Basically, that the Dolphins players didn't want to work under Fangio. Fangio wanted to switch things up, and he wanted to put the Dolphins he wanted to make the Dolphins players do things that they weren't necessarily comfortable with doing, and kind of, bring a little bit of discomfort and have them do different things, and they didn't want to work. And that was Jaws. That was the crux of what Jaws was saying. And Jaws is a good reporter. He's a respected reporter, but he is a Philly guy. He played for the Phillies. He's been a Philly guy. I hear him on the radio all the time here in Philly. He's royalty here. And, if Jaws is coming out and saying this about Vic Fangio and Vic Fangio signs with the Bears, okay, that's going to add a little bit more, again, gravitas to what he's saying. But he's defending his guy. He's defending Vic Fangio, who's now the Eagles defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
You know where Jaws is from originally, too. You know where he was born and raised.
Well, I know he went to Youngstown State, right? For college. I'm not sure where he's born and raised.
He was born right here, just outside of Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
So maybe he's got two gripes, Maybe he's just not a Dolphins fan at all. So there's two things playing against you here, Keith. Potentially.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, Josh is a good reporter, but I don't agree with everything he says about the Eagles. He has a very pro-Eagles slant to everything he says.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think there is something to be said about these older coaches maybe being a little more rigid and it's my way or the highway type deal, which I get. I can definitely see that. But maybe to go as far and say like the players are just soft and they can't take coaching and criticism, there might be some merit to that.
I don't know. Even with that, I feel like it's going a little bit too far. You see a lot of these old coaches still connecting. Belichick was bad, but it wasn't his defense that was bad. His defense still played as hard as nails every single time, even when they were down players. Like they still kept coming.
Some of the ugliest games because of how good his defense was.
Exactly. Wade Phillips was old as all dirt, and he was still one of the coaches that just got the most out of Aaron Donald. Yeah. Like players develop under these old guys sometimes. And to be honest with you, Mike McDaniel is a young head coach. I like pairing Mike McDaniel with an older coordinator who's been through the ringer. I like pairing younger head coaches with older coordinators who have been maybe failures as head coaches in the past because they've been through it all.
Yeah.
That's the guy you want to talk to. You don't want to talk to, my best friend who came up with through the coordinator jobs with me, who's never been through real adversity because whatever. Like, you want to pair him up with those old guys. I think it's a good pairing. I don't think that Fangio necessarily fit as a scheme fit, but I think he wasn't necessarily the worst idea of a defensive coordinator.
And that kind of played out on the field, Anthony, because the Dolphins defense became, at the beginning of the season when the players were still adjusting to Fangio's scheme, the offense was the strength of the Dolphins. The offense kind of carried the Dolphins through the first month or two of the season. And then once the defense caught on, that's when the offense decided to regress and the defense became the strength of the team. And all season I was looking for the Dolphins to play a complete football game, a game where I say the offense was humming, the defense was humming. This was awesome. And even, when they beat the Jets 30-0, I never felt that the Dolphins were a complete football team all season. And that's not an indictment on Fangio. Fangio did a nice job for the Dolphins defense. I'm not trying to kick a man when he's down. Yeah. But he still might not have been the best personality fit for the Dolphins locker room. Yeah. And that's something we should probably keep in perspective here. And that's something I'm sure that the GM, Chris Greer, that Mike McDaniel, that Stephen Ross, the owner, I think that's something they're all trying to keep in mind with their next hire, which is why they're interviewing so many dudes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good search there. It's a really good search there to be that thorough.
Yeah.
Who would you prefer, Keith, out of the
Leslie Frazier
interviewed?
Leslie Frazier. I love Leslie Frazier's defenses. I love what he did with the Bills. I love what he did with the Vikings prior to that. I think Leslie Frazier is a really good football coach. And getting into what you were saying, Jake, maybe you want, there to be a guy who's a little bit older, a guy to be the adult in the room. Whereas Mike McDaniel's, kind of young and, says some off the wall things. And he's buddy with the players. You want an old grizzled guy like Leslie Frazier in there to, do some of the dirty work.
Dude, how much would you love to be a fly on the wall in those interview rooms with Mike McDaniel? Questions.
Oh, yeah. That would be brilliant. Just some of the questions he'd throw at you, too. Yeah. Like, you just don't know what's coming, That would be pretty cool.
That would be awesome.
I wish Hard Knocks continued into the off season because that would be awesome to see. I agree.
That would be cool.
I hope the Dolphins get Hard Knocks. Wouldn't that be sick for the whole they had it all regular season. They just get it in the off season. It'd be fantastic.
That would be cool. Yeah, that'd be very unique. Yeah.
I actually stopped watching because it was starting to depress me.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I'll say this. So talking about Leslie Frazier a little bit and what I saw him do here in Buffalo, I thought he did a lot of very good things. Now, he runs more of a zone scheme, and also on top of that, the defense that he ran kind of aligned very well with Sean McDermott. So we ran a base nickel. So I think that would be very advantageous for you guys based on the personnel that you have. I think Cam Smith, too. You talked about him being more of a man corner, but we have a guy, Kaiir Elam, who we really didn't know what to do with this season. And I know injuries definitely played into the whole narrative with that. But his rookie year, he had some moments where he shined. And it was actually one of them was against your Dolphins. Like, he played very well against the Chiefs. Yeah. I thought Leslie Frazier actually brought out the best in Kaiir Elam, whereas this year he sort of regressed. So it could be a good thing for Cam Smith, too, if you guys were to bring on Leslie Frazier. So I like
he needs
that.
Somebody new. He needs somebody to bring out the best in him. Second round pick. And, the Dolphins haven't had, we'll get into this later on the show, obviously, but the Dolphins haven't had many picks to play with. You can't go missing on second round picks, now.
Especially a corner.
When you're having first rounders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can trust a guy named Leslie to be good. I love it.
It's a boy named Sue.
That's right. Well, going right back to the coaching discussion here, I think now it's time to discuss the team that has made a move at both the offensive coordinator position and the defensive coordinator position, although it is the same OC who will be assuming his roles, no longer with that interim name next to offensive coordinator. Our guy, Joe Brady, officially hired as the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. It's an in-house hire. I'm not too surprised by it. I know that some there were a couple of different interview candidates. I know one of those was actually Thad Lewis, which was kind of cool. Kind of cool to see because he played here in Buffalo. He actually started 5 games for us back in 2013, or 2013 or 2014 it was. And he's been the quarterback coach there in Tampa, and he's done some nice things. He's been picking up some steam. Obviously, you saw Baker Mayfield have his best year as a pro under Thad Lewis. So, yeah, I think he's definitely deserving, and he's something of an up-and-comer. Might actually get promoted to OC there for the Bucs because Dave Canales has left and become the head coach for the Panthers. So, yeah, I do like the move, though, for Joe Brady just because it's familiarity. I thought he definitely gave us a bit of a spark when we did fire Ken Dorsey. Obviously, you saw the offense perform a lot better. We got the running game going. James Cook had an incredible back half of the season for us. And I'm excited to see what the guy can do. You know, he's an experienced play caller, whereas I feel like Ken Dorsey, he knows the game as a player, but I'm not sure if he's really an experienced, like as good as a play caller as Joe Brady. So, and it's interesting because the Browns just hired Ken Dorsey as their offensive coordinator. So he's moving to the other mistake on the lake, and we got Joe Brady as our guy now. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I think we're going to take another step this year to get Josh some more weapons, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on in the show. But happy to see that move officially get inked. So great to see. On the other side of the ball, today, we just announced that we are promoting linebacker coach Bobby Babich to our defensive coordinator. And this is like the other side of things, right? So Sean McDermott, he's not necessarily old, but he's in his 50s. So bring in your coordinators as the 2 young guys, right? I think we have the second youngest offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator combo to the Arizona Cardinals. The combined age of our coordinators is like 71, where the Cardinals is like 30 or 66 or something like that. So that's an interesting move. I love that we promoted in-house. I know a lot of people, and I was with this as well. I understand the take of maybe bringing in an outsider, someone kind of looking at our team, maybe that played against them in the past and says, you know, and Sean made a good point about this, like maybe they can evaluate our team from a different angle. But I do love the fact that we promoted the guy that has helped develop some of our position groups and turn them into a better version of themselves. Now, I will agree with Sean, too, because we talked about this earlier. Basically, he mentioned that, you know, Bobby Babich, when he came to the team, we had guys that were already pretty well seasoned at the safety position because he started as the assistant defensive backs coach. So we had Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, you know, Trey White, guys like that, guys that sort of were already trending upwards, right? And I think he just kind of carried on with how good they were progressing. Then he switches over to the linebacker coach, and this year what he did with Terrell Bernard was fantastic. I mean, we didn't even miss Tremaine Edmonds, even with all the injuries. I don't think once we called for Tremaine Edmonds to come back to Buffalo. So it was just a fantastic job. He brings a new energy, and yeah, I'm fired up to have him. And good connection there. My brother, he was at Edinburgh University back in 2015 to 2019, and Bobby Babich was the defensive coordinator at Edinburgh for a hot second. Then he went to FIU, and he said the guy is just brilliant. And his dad was a defensive coordinator in the league as well. He's got very good bloodlines in that sense. He's just a coach from day one. I mean, this guy, it's the right move for the Bills. So I am pretty pumped about it, and good for Bobby Babich. He deserves it. A lot of players clamoring on Twitter about how good of a coach he is. So I'm excited about it for sure.
I think he was actually one of the interviews the Dolphins had.
He was, yes, yes. And, so I'm glad that we got him before you guys could sign him. That's all I gotta say.
When I saw that the Dolphins were interviewing him, I got a little. I thought that's not bad because of Terrell Bernard, because he brought out the best in Terrell Bernard this season. It was, you know, you like to see a coach do that. You know, a coach gets a guy and brings out the best version of that player. So I wouldn't have been upset if the Dolphins would have hired him. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a good hire by you guys, I think.
I think so too. It's good young energy, and what I love about it is the fact that Sean McDermott is not going to be micromanaging, hopefully, as much as he did last year. So last year, I think he felt that he needed to be the one calling the defensive plays because he could right all the wrongs. And obviously, as we saw in that Chiefs game, and I know the defense was decimated, but when you look at all the close games that we lost this year, 5 of those games, 5 of our losses this year, Keith, Josh Allen left the field with either a lead or a tie. And what happened? The defense gave up a game-winning field goal or a touchdown.
Yeah.
So I still think what Sean McDermott was fantastic, just because we had so many injuries on that defense. But I think it'll be good for him to just take a step back. And I am a firm believer in the best coaches letting their coaches coach. So I'm excited for this move for sure.
Yeah, that's a good move.
Yeah, without a doubt. Just want to go to the chat here. I love weed. Incredible name. Is it going to let me show it? There we go. He said, my bad. Thought y'all was talking the shitty NFC East. Looks like he's a Cowboys fan there, though, by the picture. So,
yeah.
I
mean,
he still must be pretty upset.
Yeah. NFC East is an interesting division.
It is.
Cowboys, you know, we have yet to see what they're going to do with Dak Prescott, because it seems like this year they're going to have to lock him up long term. Otherwise, they're going to get like a $55 million cap hit this year, or 59, something like that. And then, you know, the Giants are nowhere, literally nowhere. The Washington Commanders are similarly in the weeds. They don't even have a head coach yet. And the Philadelphia Eagles are one of the better teams in football. So, like, it's a weird division, man. Like, half the teams are good and half the teams are picking in the top 5.
And did you guys hear about Ben Johnson? Reportedly supposed to go interview in Washington, but then
No. Washington was flying out to interview with him.
Oh.
He's that big. But he turned him down.
Wow. That's even worse.
Yeah.
That's an indictment on the team.
Sheesh.
That's not a good feeling.
No.
That can't be a good feeling if you're the Washington Commanders, brand new owners. But I mean, let's be honest, that team is out there in the woods. I was talking to a couple of my friends, and we were talking they were talking about how they think it's a decent head coaching spot, and I think it might be low key terrible. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have an offensive line. They just traded away both of the defensive linemen, so they don't have much of a defense. Mm-hmm. They have a brand new ownership group, and you know that new owners are stupid. New owners are like, oh, you have cap space? Spend it all.
Yeah.
Oh, you have draft picks? Take a quarterback. Start him immediately.
I will say this, though.
Go ahead.
I will say this, though, Anthony. Their new ownership group is headed by Josh Harris, who owns the Philadelphia 76ers and the New Jersey Devils. So he's not exactly new to this whole ownership thing. For sure.
But ultimately, new ownerships in the NFL are notorious for we need to win. Guys, we need to get the fans in the building. And so they do really crazy, reckless, stupid things. So, is it really a great head coaching job? Or a head coaching spot? Maybe, maybe not. I wouldn't stick my neck out if you're Ben Johnson. 2 years in a row, Ben Johnson is the most coveted, sought-after head coach. And 2 years in a row, he's decided to go back to Detroit because I don't think he's liked any of the landing spots.
Well, Carolina's still got a coaching vacancy there. I would argue
Carolina hired Canales, didn't they? The guy for the offensive coordinator.
Oh, you know what? Seattle's the other vacancy. My bad.
That's correct. Seattle's the other one. And Seattle doesn't seem that terrible, but I mean, they don't have a quarterback either. But still, they've at least got stuff.
Yeah.
Well, they got Geno.
They've got
Geno.
They've got Kenneth. Let's be honest. They have Kenneth Walker. They have Zach Charbonnet. So they have a running game. They drafted both of their tackles last year. Abe Lucas in the 4th, Charles Cross in the 1st. So they have some kind of an offensive line working. They've got DK. They've got Lockett. They drafted JSN. They've got stuff going for them. They have the 2nd round pass rushers that they've been collecting for the last couple of years or so. They have stuff. Tariq Woolen, Devin Witherspoon. They have
you talk about defensive rookie of the year maybe for Devin Witherspoon.
He was season. And Tariq was 2nd for defensive rookie of the year last year behind Sauce. They have stuff. If that's a good spot
for sure
to go to, but
and Drew Lock actually looked very, very good when he came in for Geno this year too. So it's not too bad.
Their offensive coordinator left and went to where?
That's a great question. Actually, was it Tennessee? No, not Tennessee.
He went. Was it the Falcons? No. Was it
the Falcons, by the way?
He's somewhere else. They did.
Yeah.
They did lose their offensive coordinator, who was a big star on the rise. So yeah, I mean, Seattle's a decent spot, but I do think low key that Washington it might not be a particularly great landing spot for a head coach, especially like a highly prized, sought after one. But then again, do they want to go back to the well with like these old guys like Ron Rivera?
Right. Yeah. Bill Belichick. Now, the one that really does interest me, Taylor Lewan came out and said that Mike Vrabel was the best head coach he's ever played under. And I know players that love him are going to say that, right? But does it surprise you guys that he hasn't been hired by an organization, not even as a DC?
I don't think he'd go back to being a DC, Jake, first and foremost.
Yeah.
I think if he was going to be hired anywhere, he'd want to be a head coach. And I think Vrabel, after this season, it was a challenging season in Tennessee. Just felt like everything that could go wrong would go wrong, except for the Dolphins game, oddly enough. But, But I think when it comes to Mike Vrabel, I think he's just I think he's going to try and take a year off and just reevaluate everything and come back in next season, as a head coaching candidate with just feeling fresh. Because I think this season might have beaten him up a little bit. And being fired the way he was by the Titans, too, can't help. That I didn't expect that to happen. He is, in my estimation, one of the best coaches in the NFL. Didn't see the Titans go in a different direction there.
Yeah. Maybe he's like biding his time because he feels like Ryan Day is inevitably going to get fired from Ohio State, and he wants to go back to his alma mater and go back to the college game.
Hey, it wouldn't shock me. I just think he wants to take a year off, and who could blame him?
Sure.
Vrabel,
that makes sense.
The thing that would scare me about Vrabel, if I was hiring him as a head coach, and this would probably pop out in interviews, is that he seems, after the early success that he had with Tennessee, like he's going to be one of those coaches that's going to be my way or the highway. You have to give me roster control. In the Belichick kind of when Nick Saban became a head coach, when like he just seems to me like, and just the way I see him in interviews and the way I see him, he seems like he's one of those guys that's going to want total control over everything. And sometimes those guys are a nightmare because they come in and they gut the roster and they bring in a lot of the guys that were on their last teams and they're like, they want to get the band back together. Like that would scare me. But there's going to be a team, like you said, there's going to be a team that's going to give it to him. Mm-hmm. It's not in this off-season cycle.
Yeah. It's so weird. And I feel like this is the longest that we've waited. I mean, for multiple teams to bring on a new head coach. It's just bizarre to me.
Yeah. Seattle's been empty for like 3 weeks now. They fired Pete Carroll like 3 weeks ago, something like that. Washington was so quick to pull the trigger on Ron Rivera.
Right.
And like,
I thought
not too many people have been linked to Washington. I feel like they were set on Ben Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they probably were. And of course, he just he said, "Nah, guys, I'm good." He wants to run it back in Detroit. Mm-hmm. So yeah, pretty wild. Hey, Battlehawk Superfan, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you. Jake is king, and he said you dropped this. And he put a crown emoji. I appreciate you, sir. Thank you very much, as always. Roy, great to see you out there in the chat, too. Asking if Bill Belichick will get a job. Yeah, we just talked about that. I don't know. Maybe it's not this offseason. Maybe he sails off into the sunset. And I highly doubt, you talk about Mike Vrabel not wanting to downgrade and become a defensive coordinator. There is no chance in hell that Bill Belichick is going to be a defensive coordinator somewhere. So I think it's head coach or bust.
I think with Belichick, he's looking to break Don Shula's record. And the problem with hiring Bill Belichick right now is that you're getting a guy who is going to coach for your team for 3 years maximum. So, this whole head coaching hiring process, it's such a laborious, tedious process. If you're hiring Bill Belichick, you're basically signing up for going through it again in 3 years. This whole hiring process over again. And do you sign up for that with a coach that you don't necessarily know what he has left in the tank? You don't know how much passion he has left. The argument can be made that he hasn't won without Tom Brady. Yeah, I mean it's it's a cogent argument. It's not an argument that you can really argue against. He took Mac Jones to the playoffs one year where the Bills just proceeded to curb stomp them all afternoon. But Belichick really hasn't won without Tom Brady. And now you're going to bring in a 72-year-old Belichick by the time he gets back on the sideline. A 72-year-old Belichick, how much passion does he have left? Is his sole motivation for coaching to break Don Shula's record? If that's his sole motivation for coaching, then do you really want to bring him on in the first place?
Right.
I don't question Belichick's passion. I don't think that's gone anywhere. The man's a psychopath.
Yeah,
I think he lives for winning. But if you are going to bring on Belichick, you need to have a couple of very key components already involved. The first one needs to be you need to have a team ready to compete, because you can't expect a Bill Belichick rebuild. We've been waiting for the Bill Belichick rebuild for not even like 3 years, long into like the later part of Brady's career. That team was still trying to rebuild. Like, there was very little keeping them together aside from Brady to Gronk and Edelman. That was it. That was the offense for years. So you need to be ready to go right now. And you need to have a head coach or you need to have a defense that is relatively stout. It doesn't have to be like watertight. That's what Belichick is for. But you need to have an offense that can score points. So you need a really specific set of circumstances that I'm not sure any of the teams this offseason fit.
The Falcons were the closest.
Imagine next year Philadelphia completely falls apart. That's a team that's been to the Super Bowl in recent memory, has a quarterback, has an offensive line, has an identity, just needs to get somebody in there that can lock them down and can take them over the hump. That's a possible landing spot, I suppose. Not that I think you should fire Sirianni. I think he's done a good job, but you need a team that's ready to go and just needs the head coach. It reminds me of the Gruden situation when Gruden took over for Tampa Bay, and they were so close under Tony Dungy multiple times. They just needed a guy to bring in an offense that would be successful. That wasn't just, Trent Dilfer, please don't ruin the game for us. Much in that way, you get the same thing going for Bill Belichick, but on defense.
Yeah, that's well put. Shout out to Sean King, too, Anthony. You missed a very key
Sean
component
King,
of that offense. Sean King. And then they upgraded. They got Brad Johnson, who wore – you know what I love about
Brad Johnson? That was Brad Johnson
wore the elbow sleeves. That was freaking awesome, man. He put up some good numbers in 03.
Still remember that 11-6 NFC Championship game that they played against the Rams.
Man. So weird.
To Anthony's point, any offense from the Bucs in that game, they're going to the Super Bowl with the Rams that year. But that was just their defense was great and their offense couldn't get out of its own way. Sean King.
Yeah, it was like that for years, man. I was living down there and I just watched it, and those Trent Dilfer years were horrendous. The Sean King years were not much better, but like Gruden came in.
At least they had a defense.
I think that year Keyshawn Johnson. They traded 2 firsts for Keyshawn Johnson. Thank you for that. And he brought in an offensive identity. It stuck together for like 2 years before he wore out his welcome, but they got the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dungy went into the Colts and brought them a defense and did the exact same thing for them, but in the opposite way. They had Peyton Manning. They needed a defensive identity. He came in, brought that in. They won a Super Bowl.
Yeah. It's always cool to see things work out that way too, where it's like kind of evens out, So happy for both those guys, obviously. Yeah, it was definitely a good trade-off. And then Bill Callahan in Oakland. Taking them to the next step. And Rich Gannon wins an MVP in 02 as well.
Best offensive line coach in the history of the NFL, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree. You talk about a guy that's very good as a position coach, but maybe not so good as a head coach or even an OC. Bill Callahan is that guy.
Yeah.
Even
Speaking
struggled at
guys
Nebraska,
like that,
too.
I think I heard Mike Munchak once back in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a great offensive lineman and a great offensive lineman coach.
Yes, sir.
Love Mike Munchak. Hell yeah. Very nice. How about this, Brett, with a hot take? I'll tell you what team will be looking for a new head coach soon: the Kansas City Chiefs.
He might not be wrong about that.
Andy Reid, if he wins a Super Bowl, does he retire?
I don't know that he necessarily retires, but I think he's got one eye on retirement right now. He's 65 years old. How much longer can you realistically expect him to coach for?
Bill Belichick's 72, and we're talking about his next job.
Yeah, but
recency bias. I feel like Bill just has an itch to win now. Like, it's been so long. It's what, 5 years since he's gotten himself a ring?
Yeah.
I mean, for him, that's like an eternity, right? So Andy Reid, pretty recent with the rings. So yeah.
I actually have a hotter take with regards to the Chiefs. I think Travis Kelce might retire.
Ooh, I have heard that as well.
Wouldn't shock me
as well. Yeah.
If him and Jason retire the same year and then announce on their podcast, the numbers.
Gosh.
Yeah.
If they win a Super Bowl, if they do win this Super Bowl, Travis Kelce is going to probably propose to Taylor Swift.
Yep.
On top of that, he's sitting on a gold mine
at
with his
the 50-yard line.
At the
in the celebration. Let's do it.
Crazy.
Oh, God.
There are actually prop bets around that. I'm not going to talk to.
No, there are.
I don't know that my
no, there
heart.
are. You can't be serious with that. Somebody
There
in
are,
the chat,
I swear.
find it. Link me to it.
I think it's like
that.
plus 190 right now. The odds for it. It's crazy.
Please put that in the chat. I'm clicking on it. I'm putting $5 on it. I swear.
I will start uncontrollably crying as soon as it happens.
That's hilarious. Well, speaking of the Chiefs, it's been a while. So, I said at the beginning of the show, we're going to talk about the AFC NFC Championship to start it off. It's been 46 minutes, fellas. This is just how we roll. We love going off on tangents, and we talk across every topic you can possibly think of. But I do want to go back to this weekend, right? It was an interesting 2 games that we had. So it started with the AFC Championship. We had the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs. And let me tell you guys something. I underestimated the Kansas City Chiefs.
Me too.
Hand up. When the lights are the brightest, they shine the most. It is absolutely incredible what they've done. It's their 6th straight AFC Championship appearance. They go to their 2nd Super Bowl in a row, their 4th Super Bowl in 5 years. And, man, it's just, God, shout out to them. Their coaching was fantastic. Steve Spagnuolo with another beautiful job, making adjustments, doing what he does best. It wasn't even, the guy didn't even bring pressure. He just sat in cover 2 all game and baited Lamar to play hero ball and to do his thing. And Lamar didn't do his thing. I could tell you that. It was incredible. And I know a lot of people are out there saying, oh, it's rigged and everything. I actually saw this guy come out with a take, and he's like, listen, I am the biggest conspiracy theorist in the world, but I'm going to say right now that this is not scripted. Sure, it maybe aligns with what the NFL wants because they're going to get even more money from all the Taylor Swift hoopla and all that good stuff. But you can't fake that. There's too much agony and defeat. Pat Mahomes himself, I mean, some of the throws that he made in this game, especially to put the final dagger in as Marquez Valdez-Scantling is falling backwards to make that catch to officially seal it. I just feel like that stuff, that's either the greatest acting job of all time, a million times better than the WWE could ever be, or it's not scripted. And I like to think that it's probably not scripted. Sure, refs can make an influence. Sure, there were a lot of flags thrown, but the Ravens were playing pretty stupidly too. I mean, they were making some boneheaded flags, some boneheaded moves, and the Chiefs got under their skin. Let's call a spade a spade. Travis Kelce, sure, he was chirping a little bit, but he didn't get up and take the ball and throw it at the defender. I mean, he didn't push off the defender's head. And I love Zay Flowers, don't get me wrong, but I think that was a pretty good version of taunting there. Yeah. And listen, if they're going to call Josh Allen on taunting for giving a little peace sign as he scores a touchdown, you better damn well make that call. So at least there's some consistency in that sense. But again, I mean, the Chiefs took it to him. And fellas, I want to get your thoughts on this because I've been talking a lot. Anthony, I'm going to start with you. Give me your official breakdown of this Ravens-Chiefs game.
I mean, it was a snooze fest, especially in the second half.
Yeah. The under.
I know that we're talking about how like Pat Mahomes just, is the greatest quarterback in the history of like quarterbacks or football. And he was really, really, really good. But like they scored 0 points in the second half, fellas. Mm-hmm. This was not an offensive slugfest. This is 2 defensive teams, 2 very, in my opinion, I felt like Spagnuolo had a great game plan. I felt like Lamar missed on a couple of opportunities to take off. I know that they were spying him, but like he can make a guy miss. And he did his part, I think, to stay in the pocket. I was disappointed very much in Mark Andrews. This is his first game back in a while. And Isaiah Likely, I felt like was underutilized because probably Mark Andrews came back. Isaiah Likely has been the heart and soul of that offense for a couple of weeks now. Zay Flowers did what a rookie wide receiver does when he's locked down. Yeah. He's a rookie wide receiver. Where was Odell Beckham Jr.?
Yeah.
Like they brought him in $13 million. He had like 30 catches this year? Mm-hmm. Nice stealing job from him.
And he had 3 catches for 22 yards in this one. And it really took him until about the third quarter to start making those catches.
Yeah. And they were all on one drive, I thought.
Yeah.
That dude did a nice bank job. There's nobody gets paid on their old reputation better than Odell Beckham Jr. at this point.
Agreed.
he's whew, that dude is still raking it in. Meanwhile, like, DeAndre Hopkins is begging to be on a team that doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, functionally, I thought it was a very defensive game on both sides. I think, like I said, it's possible that Travis Kelce retires because he's not what he was a couple of years ago. He's barely what he was last year. I would have a hard time imagining if they win a Super Bowl, he's going to come back. Very, very boring game. The best part is, I think, and we'll talk about the next game in a minute, but, like, out of this game, we're going to get that Pat Mahomes and Brock Purdy are both franchise quarterbacks, and it's the weirdest thing because Pat Mahomes had very little to do with them winning this game, and Brock Purdy did his absolute best to punt the last one for the 49ers.
Amen to that.
That's my rundown of this game. It was just boring.
I like it. Yeah, I think that's a very good breakdown, Anthony. I want to bring up this comment by Roy. The Ravens only had 8 carries by their running backs. And actually, Roy, let me correct you on that because they only had 6 carries by their running backs. They had 2 carries by Zay Flowers, 3 by Justice Hill, and 3 by Gus Edwards. And I think they ran the ball a grand total of maybe like 3 times in the second half. And majority of those were Lamar. I think it was 1 carry to a running back and 2 to Lamar himself. Keith, as a man that has a plethora of running backs, such as the Ravens did, the whole bread and butter of their offense, what the hell happened to them? Did Todd Monken just throw this game? I mean, you want to talk about rigging the game. Maybe this was the biggest rig job that we should be talking about is Todd Monken just abandoning the run. What the hell happened?
Yeah, I don't agree with him abandoning the run. I do think he put the ball into his best player's hands, and his best player didn't deliver for him. And that's what you do in games like that. You put it into Lamar's hands and you say, okay, Lamar, take us to the Super Bowl. And he didn't do it. But, the Zay Flowers play, that played into it. And then he fumbles on the goal line a couple plays later where the Chiefs recovered. This game could have gone in a whole different direction if a couple of plays would have gone the Ravens' way. And I know that we say that a lot in these games. In these tight NFC, AFC championship games, 2 really good teams, 2 heavyweights going toe-to-toe with one another, but it really is the case. Zay Flowers maybe, resist the temptation to get that taunting penalty, and maybe if he doesn't dive for the goal line like that, doesn't fumble on the goal line like that, this game could have been a whole different game. But I think what really stuck out the most to me was the coaching of the Chiefs. And the evolution of the Chiefs. They were a team that was built on offense as early as last year. They were a team that was just an offensive juggernaut, and they've kind of pivoted to becoming this ball control, defensive-minded team, where they're handing it off to Isaiah Pacheco, whereas before they would make Patrick Mahomes go and beat you. And now they're just more of what the Ravens said that they were supposed to be going into this game. They out-ravened the Ravens in this game. And it was pretty cool to see because this coaching staff, Andy Reid being chief among them, I love Andy Reid as a head coach. I love Andy Reid as a coach. Always have. I think he's the greatest offensive mind of our generation, but I think what he does best is he lets his coordinators cook. and he lets Steve Spagnuolo, he lets Steve Spagnuolo take the Ravens to the Super Bowl this year. It was, we all underestimated them. We all put our hands up. I underestimated the Chiefs going into the playoffs. I was foolish enough to think the Dolphins had a chance against the Chiefs up in Kansas City a few weeks back.
Me too, man.
Yeah.
Me too.
I was foolish. I was foolish enough to let myself hope that the Dolphins could beat the Chiefs in January. And you know what? It takes so much to beat this Chiefs team in January. They are so battle tested. They are so good when the lights are the brightest. Hats off to them. Well done.
Well put. Well put. Now, more importantly, I do want to ask this question that Battlehawks came in with. How much can you bench Anthony?
I'm going to tell you right now, my bench press is nothing.
Oh, really?
I don't. My bench is not much at all. I'm all show and no go.
Really? So we're talking 225. Can you do that at least once or twice? Or
I haven't maxed my bench in a long time. I bench for reps 195. So I imagine maybe I can put up 225 once, maybe.
All right. Listen, you better get traded.
My leg press was always my game. Back in the day, I was leg pressing about 1,000. Now I can pretty comfortably get around 750 for like 10 reps.
Sheesh, that's still incredible.
Yeah,
it's my legs that are
Anthony,
stuck.
how old are you?
39.
Wow, you don't look a day over 20.
I'm an old man. I'm an
25.
old soul. I'm an old.
You look good, man. Your arms say otherwise, as Battlehawk says.
Yeah,
I want you prepared. I want
Okay.
you to prepare. We are going to do a meetup, and we're going to have our first ever AFC East Summit Combine at some point in our life. It's got to happen.
Love it.
We're going to get the 40. We're going to get the bench press. We're going to get the vertical. We're doing it all, baby. Mike Thornton is going to officiate.
I might be good at broad jump.
Okay.
I think I'm good at broad jump. I'm explosive power.
We're going to do the 40s. Can you put it like a lawn chair at like the 20-yard line so I can take a break?
You know what you got to do for me?
The 40, 100%.
Yeah, Chris would probably smoke us. I tell you what you got to do. At the end of the 40 yards there, just put a bag of chips there for me. I'll run the fastest I've ever ran. That'd be great. Yes. That's funny. How about this? Ask the panel if they're ready for the USFL as I am. I don't know if I know a bigger UFL fan than Battlehawk super fan here. Yeah, it's every show. You ask about it. He's making a full Bills roster of former Bills players that are in the UFL right now. I mean, Malachi Wideman, is he playing this year? Battlehawks?
I know
we had.
Do you think we can get a fantasy USFL like league going for us? Do you think we can do that?
Yeah, we can definitely do it. I don't know if they have a
platform. It'll make me watch
but
these games that I don't want to watch.
Yeah,
during COVID,
I'd do that.
When they had the initial bringing back of the XFL, I did do an XFL fantasy league with 5 other guys, and I did it all by hand on a spreadsheet, and it was incredible. And they would have to text me moves that they wanted to make, and it was pretty awesome. I'll have to send it to you guys.
That is the old school way of like how rotisserie leagues. Like, so do you remember the ESPN 40 for 40s?
Oh yeah.
Okay, or 30 for 30. Sorry. The second or third one that they did was on a fantasy league, like the first ever baseball fantasy league, the rotisserie league.
Wow.
It was named the rotisserie league because they actually came up with the idea at a rotisserie restaurant. So those guys that were in the first ever league, they started a second league a few years later, and it was like this super secret game in New York City. And every year they would have like their draft, and I didn't know this at the time. They would have their draft. One of them worked as he worked at like a book publishing company.
Oh wow!
A friend of mine was in this league. He had gotten in like 20 years ago or something, and he was cool. I was like his consigliere. So he brought me to the league just to like help him because I was deep in fantasy baseball at that point. So like I was in the live draft with these guys because they drafted live, and like we would call out bids. It was the sickest thing ever, and it was super cool in this like publishing place in New York City, in Lower Manhattan. It was like one of the coolest experiences I've had before.
That is sweet.
But yeah, I can say that I've drafted with the first ever baseball rotisserie league guys.
Holy smokes! You remember any of the guys on that roster for you?
Oh yeah, no, I was a really big proponent of grabbing. I think I grabbed like Heath Bell. Cheap.
Ooh, nice.
I had
Okay.
like Heath Bell, and I wasn't the one calling out the bid because I didn't have the team, so I wasn't allowed to.
Yeah.
But I'd have to like write a name silently to my friend and have my friend Wade at that point like call out the bids, and we can go up to 5 on them. Don't worry.
That is amazing. I freaking love that, man. I love that. That cool. Reminds me, do you guys remember in 2003 when the Minnesota Vikings didn't get their pick in on time? I think it happened 2 years in a row for them.
2 years in a row, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That That's wild. Was Kevin Williams?
It was, what's his name? Randy Ratio guy.
Yeah. Yes, I know who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about, right? He was an offensive lineman.
Mike Tice.
Yeah.
Mike Tice.
Yeah.
Mike Tice was the coach. Yep.
Yep, that was the guy. And it was 2 years in a row. You're absolutely right. It was just the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Although I think with one of those picks, like I said, 2003 was Kevin Williams, I want to say. So that was a win. That was a great pick by them. And then after that, I forget who it was. Was Ontario Smith? No, 2002 maybe? Something like that. Yeah, Michael Bennett? No.
Could have been Michael Bennett.
No, Bennett was before that.
Bennett,
they
Brian McKinney.
To replace Robert Smith.
Bryant McKinney. I think you're
Bryant
right.
Mountain McKinney.
Yeah, Mount McKinney. He was huge.
Yeah.
Talk about a mammoth human being. 6'8", like 330. Yeah.
Great nickname.
How about the Minnesota Vikings love boat scandal too? We can make a whole freaking show on that one. I mean,
we need to get to the NFC Championship.
We do. Yes, yeah. We're already at an hour here. All right, NFC Championship, fellas. Yes. You know, perhaps the most sad I was during the day, and you know, I don't have a lot of sad moments in my life, but I hate seeing Dan Campbell lose, man. And you know, people are very critical of his decision to go for it on 4th down 2 times in that game when he could have taken the 3 points. So it's frustrating, just because, you know, obviously the Lions never been to a Super Bowl. It's their first opportunity. They have a commanding lead at the half, and you just knew something was going to turn. And that second half, the 49ers came out stronger than ever. They score a touchdown, and you're like, oh boy, this is going to maybe be a battle here. The Lions better straighten some things out. And unfortunately, they don't score another touchdown until late in the 4th quarter. And at that point, kind of all hope was lost. So, Keith, what went wrong for the Detroit Lions in this game? And why are the San Francisco 49ers such a good team and maybe the Chiefs of the NFC?
Yeah, you know, I love San Francisco's coaching staff almost as much as I love Kansas City's. I love what Kyle Shanahan does. I love what his defenses do. You know, I love what his offense does. It's still a very innovative offense. And it's easy to be innovative when you have the skill position players that they have. Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. I mean, they've got some heavy hitters on that offense. So it was only a matter of time before the offense kind of woke up and started to play up to their capabilities. But I think what it boils down to here is that the Lions took their foot off the gas, and they started, you know, at one point C.J. Gardner-Johnson was waving goodbye to the 49ers fans, and it's the 3rd quarter. Like, dude, you know, what are you doing? Why are you poking the bear? Why are you doing that? And then Dan Campbell, I love Dan Campbell, the coach. I love Dan Campbell, the man. I love how bold he is, but there's a fine line between bold and foolhardy. And Dan Campbell crossed it on Sunday. He didn't just cross it, he jumped across that damn thing. When you're down 27-24 and you just need some points to tie it up, you tie the damn game. You don't go for it on 4th down there. And you saw it earlier on in the season in the Cowboys game when they went for 2 3 different times, one of which from the 7-yard line. You're just
that was so terrible.
You're just being foolish.
Tough.
You know, you're not being aggressive. You're being foolish. And somebody needs to get in Dan Campbell's ear and say, "I'm all for aggression, but don't cross a line here." And that's what Dan Campbell did. I'm not going to put the loss completely on Dan Campbell. That's not fair. I'm going to give the win to the San Francisco 49ers for coming back in that game and making it a football game. But Dan Campbell needs to improve his situational awareness going forward. He can't keep on doing that to your team. You take the points when you can get them at some points there.
How about this? You being called a double agent. Keith, is that true? Because I'll tell you what, man, Trent Sherfield did not live up to the expectations this year for our team.
Yeah, I mean,
400-yard receiver, has good chemistry with Josh in the offseason. I don't know what the hell happened. I mean, he caught maybe 8 passes here for like 62 yards.
I mean,
like that.
Like Anthony said,
Trent Sherfield too.
Trent Sherfield made some nice plays for the Dolphins last season. He made some decent catches, but I mean, what were you expecting from him? Honestly, I mean,
and there's so many mouths to feed as it is, so I get it. But I was hoping for maybe like some splash plays every here and there. I mean, in that Dolphins game, he did make up for some things because he caught that touchdown pass, which basically just tip drill at that point, right?
Oh yeah, so, I mean that was a hell of a play by him, and if he didn't make any other play for you guys this season, he was worth it. That was a hell of a play.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. Tony, good to see you out there, Tone. Tone did our preview show for the AFC and NFC championship games, and we talked a little bit about this. I believe Tony said that there was not a shot in hell that Detroit would be close in this game. So much so that I don't even think he thought they would cover, which they did cover in this game. They should have won this game. I agree with the fact that this does fall on Dan Campbell's shoulders, of course. I don't hate that he went for it at least one of those times, but I think situationally, when you haven't scored a single point in the second half, not kicking the field goal to tie the game was foolish. And I do think it was a moment where maybe his pride got in the way of, logical decision-making. And I love Dan. I love the fact that he stayed consistent and he still went for it. I still don't even hate that call necessarily, just because he stayed consistent with who he was and he's always gone for it. So you may as well do it there. So, and I'll tell you what, we're singing a different tune if they do make that 4th down conversion. I bet they win that game if they actually make that. So
they might
totally
understand. I understand what you're saying, Jake. I don't know that I would be singing a different tune. I watched that game with my dad and I said, even if they get this is a
the Niners were
decision.
rolling.
Yeah. I said, even if they get this is a stupid decision. I don't care how you slice it. You're on the 30-yard line. Kick the damn field goal. Honestly.
Yeah, that's fair.
The damn field goal.
Definitely. Jake, when can you get out west? Need to do a Nickel City Mafia Summit out in God's country. I agree. Tony, I'm with you. We actually just talked about doing a meetup with these guys too, the AFC East Summit show. Maybe we can combine it all, do a full Nickel City Mafia Creators Summit out there in Cali where the weather's beautiful and you guys get cold when it's below 60 degrees for good reason. I'm not chirping you. I get it. It's much better. It's actually 34 degrees right now, so it's relatively warm here right now. But
dude, it's over 40 here. That's half the reason the tank top's out. I finished up at the gym. I walked back in my gym shorts.
I love it, man. I love it.
Wonderful.
Yeah. But Tony, one caveat on this: we do need to do a combine when we're together in person. After being inspired by Anthony's physique today and him showing off the gun show, we are going to do the full thing. We're going to do a 40-yard dash, the bench, the vertical jump, broad jump. Now, Tony, I don't know if you guys know this, Tony did play football at Boise State. He was like a young Elvis Doomerville back in the day for Boise State. He had 5 sacks his senior year. Guy was a beast on the field. He had some long hair. He had some long locks, too, back in the day. He played with guys like Quentin Michael, Brian Johnson. There's a couple other guys, too, that I could probably name. Right, Tone? Fill me in on this. But nonetheless, Anthony, I'm going to get to you because we're at 9:10 here. I know Keith has to work. Give me your take on this Niners-Lions game.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's criticizing Dan Campbell going for it at the 4th down multiple times. And there's other people that are criticizing him, like just taking the points at the end of the half. Be honest with you, like, live by the sword, die by the sword.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take away the aggression when it doesn't work. You want to add it when it does. Like, nobody complains when like a field goal kicker misses a kick or gets it blocked because that was the right call versus going for it on 4th down. Like we are talking a little bit differently if Josh Reynolds doesn't drop a ball that's literally in his palms.
Just horrible.
Like, horrible. The game, we always say the game of inches, right? Like anything could have happened. the fact is they needed to stem the bleeding. So, like, I could see the point of going for 3 and tying the game up. But at the same time, like, how much is your team fired up if you get it?
True.
How much is your team fired up if you get the 7 and don't go for it, and go for it on 4th down? I mean, you can't. There's something to be said about momentum. And I know that analytics says that momentum isn't a thing, but like it also is because they've studied it in psychology, and they studied the psychology of a team that has a big lead and watches that lead start to give away. That's actually there's documented evidence, sports psychology evidence of team psychology of a team that is up a huge amount and then slowly watches the game whittle away. And taking the 3, maybe that's putting a Band-Aid on it, but getting the 7 stops the momentum right there.
I like that. Yeah. That's spot on. I think Dan Campbell, this is a great comparison. I think Dan Campbell is the Josh Allen of coaches. Where you're thinking at times like, what did he do? What? And then other times you're like, this guy's the man. He's the greatest coach in the NFL. Like, I freaking love this guy. Just purely built on emotion, and at times just gets a little too fired up, and it's like sugar high almost. Just like my guy, Josh Allen. So that's the best comparison I can draw. That's probably why I love him so much.
Yeah.
I agree. And he's gritty as hell. I love it.
Yeah.
He is.
But
I like the analogy, Jake. I like the analogy.
You know, right? It makes sense to me. But yeah, it's unfortunate we will not be seeing the Lions in the Super Bowl. Now, I will say I'd be a little salty if the Lions end up getting a Super Bowl before the Bills. So there is that side of me where it's like, you know what? It wasn't their time yet. You know, maybe next year we'll have a Bills-Lions Super Bowl. And then it's like the battle for Ralph Wilson, because Ralph Wilson, of course, grew up in Detroit, was a part owner of the Lions, then came to Buffalo, founded the team. Beautiful history between those two. So we can only hope for that next season. I know you guys don't want to hear that.
You guys played in the Lions Stadium when Rex Ryan took the team to.
That's why we go to Detroit, man.
And then they beat us anyway, despite the fact that you didn't even have a home.
That was crazy.
To beat us in a home game. So beautiful, beautiful chemistry between the Lions and the Buffalo Bills.
I love it, man.
For sure.
Yeah. Tony, Legadou Nani. Nice receiver for the Chargers back in the day. Jared Zabransky on the cover of NCAA Football 2008, was it? Because I think 07 was Reggie Bush. Yeah. Desmond Howard was 06, Reggie Bush, Jared Zabransky. Love that. And I think it was different. PS2 to Xbox was different with the players on the cover, but
love
Jared
that
Zabransky,
game,
man.
Love that game.
So good. So good. It's just not
coming
the same,
back this year.
I hope so. I really do. I don't know.
I hope they don't mess it up because Madden's terrible.
Right? It is. It is. We could have a whole show on how bad Madden is. I don't know if you guys watch this.
There's plenty of YouTube content on it already.
Soft Drink TV does a fantastic job. He started the whole hashtag something like drop EA or something like that, or pretty wild. They caught on pretty good, but yes. Fellas, we don't have much time here, but I figured I would keep this short and sweet as it was. In terms of where you want to see your teams go this offseason, you know, we have our squads. They unfortunately just came up short this year. So there's things that we want to happen in the offseason. So I figured we'd limit it to 3 things tonight. We could talk more as the offseason goes. But number 1, a player that you would like to draft. It could just be a position or a player in general. Number 2, a target for your team in free agency. And number 3, a player you would like to re-sign and bring back to your team. I'm going to start with Anthony on this one.
All right. Re-sign, I would love to see them go get Bryce Huff, but I don't think they will. But I want to bring him back. You have a UDFA guy comes in, works his tail off. Last year, 10 sacks, clearly one of the fastest edge rushers in the NFL. And you want to talk about fast, I'm not talking about a dude that's reactionary. I'm talking about a guy that gets off the line literally before anybody else.
Yeah.
Off the snap. He's so fast. Shockingly. Reaction fast. The dude's terrifying. I would love to bring him back. I don't know if we will. Free agency. I'm going to actually go a little bit. I would love to see us not in so much free agency. I'd love to see us trade for Devontae. I would love to see us trade for Devontae, and if that trade means that we trade down from the 3rd round to the 4th round, giving up our 3rd round pick for a 4th round pick and Devontae to the Raiders, I would like to see that because he's an aging receiver. He's got a big salary cap space. He's got a big salary cap hit, but we need to get another receiver that's not named Garrett Wilson because our numbers 2 and 3 receivers by the end of the season, I don't know if you guys noticed, but we're UDFAs coming into the season.
Yeah.
That's how bad. That's how bad. So I'd like to see us go there. And offensive line, if recent mocks have Olu falling to 10, which is weird. Daniel Jeremiah for some reason has Olu as offensive tackle 3. I don't buy any of that smoke right now. It's still too early, but I'll take Fuaga. That dude is an animal. That dude is so much fun.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I like that, Anthony. Yeah. I think that Devontae Adams trade too, by the way, it's one of those trades where it does make sense on paper because you made a good point. He's an aging receiver. He's got a big contract. So it does make sense. But I think if that trade does happen, you guys totally fleece the Raiders because he's going to put up numbers there with A-Rod. You just know it. It's going to happen.
And the thing is, old receivers don't tend to cost that much. I see people talking about a 1st round pick, a 2nd round pick, a 3rd round pick, whatever. But no. Randy Moss was traded for a 4th round pick or something like that.
Yeah. And Napoleon Harris or was it Napoleon something like that. I think it was Napoleon.
But Napoleon Harris, yeah.
They get traded for almost nothing these days. They've always have. Terrell Owens went for a 5th round pick. This is what happens. They cost a lot of money, and nobody wants to put them on a team that doesn't even have a quarterback. There's no point.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Keith, Tony says trade Tua. I'm assuming you're totally against that, but I want to get your take. So a player to re-sign, a player to target in free agency, and then a potential draft choice that you would like to see come to the Dolphins.
Well, a player to target in free agency is a guy like them to just bring back. Robert Hunt's about to be a free agent, and the Dolphins need to bring him or Connor Williams back. Ideally both. The Dolphins are so strapped with their cap this offseason. It's going to be such an interesting offseason just to see how they manage this, how they get under the cap so they can sign some of these guys that are going to be getting away from them. Andrew Van Ginkel's a free agent. Christian Wilkins is going to be a free agent. I don't have much hope of him coming back. Connor Williams, Robert Hunt. There's a bunch of dudes, a bunch of contributors to the Dolphins this season that are likely gone in free agency. And the Dolphins have to figure out a way to bring some of these guys back because these were guys that contributed a lot to their success this season. All these get Tua out of here things. One of the ways the Dolphins are going to manage their cap this offseason is to extend Tua.
Three-way trade? Look at this.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I love it, Tony. I love it.
The Dolphins are going to probably try to extend Tua this offseason and not trade him, not to jettison him to another team. Tua's a guy you can win with, but you need to put an offensive line in front of him. You need to put an interior offensive line in particular in front of him. And if you want to look at a blueprint here for how you for how you build an offensive line in front of a less than ideal sized quarterback with limited athleticism, you look at how the Saints built their offensive line in front of Drew Brees. They got guys like Jonathan Goodwin, Jari Evans, their other guard, Carl Nix. These were guys that were a brick. They were a brick wall in front of Drew Brees, and this is what the Dolphins need to do. Connor Williams was playing at an all-pro level before he went down with his injury.
Yeah.
And that was low-key the biggest loss of the season for the Dolphins. Once Connor Williams went down, you started seeing defensive tackles get so much push on Tua. And when you get push on a quarterback, especially a shorter quarterback, get in his face a little bit, his throws are going to be high. And a lot of Tua's interceptions were throws that were high, that were over the receivers' heads. You saw it against the Bills, you saw it against the Ravens, you saw it against the Chiefs. they were high throws that Tua didn't necessarily want to make, but he had to make. So you asked me who I want the Dolphins to draft. Offensive line, interior offensive line. Fuaga, Anthony. He looks like a guard to me in the NFL. I've seen mocks where he lasts to the 21st pick for the Dolphins. I don't see it happening.
People are insane. He's not getting there.
I don't see it happening.
Fautanu, though. You might get Fautanu from Washington. He's projected as a guard. Very good size for a guard. I think he's like 6'4", something like that. Decently long arms. A lot of pop. He fit.
Yeah. I mean, get rid of. Look, Tua's got plenty of arm strength for the NFL. He can succeed in the NFL. I understand what you're saying. I understand all the criticism for Tua, but
it's a sexier choice, I think, right now. Just based on.
Hold on. How do you say that Tua has like a noodle arm when like he did that like half step up 60-yard bomb to like Tyreek in week 3?
There were moments this year where it's like, okay, this guy
he has the arm to be in the NFL. We're not talking about a Bryce Young where like he's got a pop gun and you're hoping it's gonna work.
What you need to do is you need to put an offensive lineman in front of need to put an offensive line in front of Tua. And when I look at a guy who I want the Dolphins to bring back more than anything is Christian Wilkins. He's a lifelong Dolphin. Yeah. I love him as a leader. I love him as a man. I love him as a player. But the Dolphins can't afford to bring back Christian Wilkins and put a functional offensive line in front of Tua next season. So Christian Wilkins has to go, and they have to focus on the offensive line. So they need to bring in an offensive line to protect Tua. You do that, and then Tua gets more pocket awareness. He gets more confidence behind that offensive line. You're going to see that's going to help bring out the best in Tua, and you don't need a Tyreek Hill. What you need is an offensive line. I was saying this on our Discord chat, guys. You can go back to Pop Warner. You can go back to George Halas or Vince Lombardi, all the way up through, all the guys, Tom Landry, Chuck Noll, Bill Walsh, all the way up to present day. This game has evolved so much, but one thing has always been a universal truth in the NFL. This game is won and lost in the trenches. Mm-hmm. We just talked about the championship game. The number 4 teams that played in the championship game were ranked 2, 3, 5, and 6 by Pro Football Focus, their offensive lines. This game is still won and lost in the trenches, and the Dolphins were 23rd this season. That is their second best ranking in the last 10 years. That is pathetic. Yeah. That is pathetic. The Dolphins need to push all their chips in the middle of the table and rebuild this offensive line in front of Tua. They can win with Tua, but put an offensive line in front of him and then criticize him if you have to.
I agree. And I think I will say this, Keith. I think had some of those guys stayed healthy this year, you guys would have been a lot better.
Yeah, I agree.
But that's the issue too. I mean, depth is an issue in itself. I mean, you want to have guys you can rely on. So I'm with you on that. That makes a lot of sense to me. 23rd. What? Yep. And that's the best ranking in the last 10 years or something
Second best. Their best ranking in the last 10 years, I believe, was back in 2017. Wow. The year Tannehill went down with a knee right before they made the playoffs. But they were ranked 21st that year. So they haven't been in the top 2/3 of the league in offensive line in the last 10 years. That's pathetic, guys. That's so pathetic. And it's no wonder the Dolphins haven't won a playoff game in that time.
I do think you guys need another pass catcher. I know that Waddle is really good. I know that Tyreek is obviously one of the best to have ever done it, but you really would benefit from another pass catcher because
I think we would benefit from a tight end, Anthony, like a pass catching tight end who can also block. I like that guy from is it Tennessee, Taylor.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like him. I want to see them. We do need another pass catcher. You're absolutely right, but I don't think pass catchers were actually our problem this year. They didn't use Braxton Berrios enough. They didn't give Tua enough.
Cedric Wilson came on.
Braxton Berrios is still just a Braxton Berrios at the end of the day.
I think Braxton Berrios was underused in this offense. I think they could have used him in a more Cole Beasley-ish way.
He's not Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley would catch 80 passes for 800 yards. Braxton Berrios has peaked at 450, and he's going to stay there because that's all a Braxton Berrios ever is. It's a Trent Sherfield, but like Braxton.
I love that. I love hearing
That's
this.
all. Like
This is
you
beautiful.
do need another pass catcher. You could go with tight end, but I like, to be honest with you, I don't love drafting tight ends and expecting them to play immediately and be really good. Like you can draft them in the 4th or 5th and let them sit for a little bit. You can find tight ends in free agency that can do a job.
Well, I wanted Washington, who got drafted by the Steelers last year.
You also wanted Dalton Kincaid, am I right?
Well, I wanted Dalton Kincaid. I wanted Sam Laporta. I wanted the kid that went to Green Bay. Like there were so many opportunities. It was such a tight end rich draft last year, and the Dolphins just drafted that dude. I forget what his name was now. He's
Elijah Higgins.
Elijah Higgins. Yeah, he's not even on the Dolphins anymore. I think he's on the Cardinals.
Yeah,
you know, they dropped the ball on that one. You know, there's so many needs for this team, especially along the offensive line, and you can't plug them all. You can't plug them all because you don't have the cap space to do it. It's going to be a tough offseason. It's going to be like watching a train wreck the entire way.
Oh, man. No faith in your Dolphins, Keith. Listen.
Yeah, right?
Hold
like,
that head
you guys
up high,
just won
man.
12 games and he's talking about a train wreck.
Listen, you guys are close. I think Tony puts this well. I don't necessarily agree with his Tua take. I understand where he's coming from, but I agree with you. I think he put an offensive line in front of Tua. Tua hasn't had an opportunity to reach his potential because he hasn't had the protection. In fact, he's been so damn injury prone.
In conversations, it was all Tua's getting rid of the ball in 2.2 seconds because they can't protect around him, and he's still making it work somehow. Like, let's get him a little bit more. We'll get him a more solid, especially interior offensive line. But you are going to need a replacement for Armstead. So, there's no reason that you couldn't go tackle, or you couldn't go one of these swing guard tackle types, the Fatanus or the Fuagas that like have the ability to maybe play guard earlier in the year or early in their career, and then Armstead gets hurt, just like they did with Tyler Smith for the Cowboys.
Yeah,
move back to tackle.
Absolutely. That would be ideal, Anthony. But they need to do something and need to go all in by doing it. They have they don't have a 3rd round pick this year. They have a 1st and a 2nd.
Yeah,
I would not be upset if they use both those picks on offensive linemen.
It's a good offensive
Tony really wants you guys to get Justin Fields.
Yeah, man. I want nothing to do with Justin Fields.
Go from the fastest release quarterback in the NFL to the slowest. Seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
I gotta say, I've been watching some of JT O'Sullivan's breakdowns on the Bears game, specifically with Justin Fields, and
he's a crotchety old man. But tell us more.
He is. He definitely is. It's interesting, man. There are some moments where he heel clicks, and there are a lot of those, like, oh my gosh, like, get rid of the football, and but also some brilliance too.
Is so slow now. If you go back and I did this experiment, I went back and watched some of his like Ohio State stuff, and like his drop back was more intentional at Ohio State. Yeah. Now it's sort of lazy, and he gets to his drop when he wants to get to his drop, and maybe he gets sacked before that, maybe he doesn't.
Yep. I couldn't agree more, Anthony. And I like Justin Fields. I'm rooting for him. Man, I feel like Chicago has been definitely not a great fit for him just because it's Chicago, and this is the only franchise in the NFL that hasn't had a 4,000-yard passer. There's a reason for that. They got to figure it out there. Although they had a nice end of the season. But, guys, we're running short on time, so I'm going to go quick here. I was ready for this. So one thing I'm very proud of is our offensive line and how we played this year, and that is a position group that maybe we look at adding more depth to, potentially. But the number one thing I want out of the draft this year, and we're going to have to go cheap labor because our cap room is very minimal. We're in cap hell right now. But I want this kid, Xavier Leggett, in the 1st round. Draft a wide receiver in the 1st round. Do you guys know who our highest drafted wide receiver is under the Brandon McBean era? The Brandon Bean, Sean McDermott era, the McBean era? Do you know who that is?
Who is it?
Gabe Davis in the 4th round.
Wow.
And he's actually our highest drafted receiver on the roster. Steph Diggs was a 5th round pick. And I know Steph Diggs is Steph Diggs, but it's insane. Josh Allen, you talk about getting him a weapon. Listen, I know last year we take Dalton Kincaid in the 1st round, but we haven't had a 1st round receiver, not even a 3rd rounder. We've had a
Where was Shakir taken?
5th.
He was a 5th
which
round.
is a nice gem. And I think we found our slot guy, but I want an outside receiver that can develop into from a 2 to a 1. that is going to succeed and take over for Stephon Diggs. And I think
Brian Thomas going to you guys a lot.
I like Brian Thomas too. I would love that. 6'4" guy again. Xavier Leggett, 6'3", 227. Brian Thomas, 6'4",
Xavier Leggett just measured in 6'1" at the Senior Bowl.
Really?
Yeah, he's a lot shorter than he thought he was.
See that.
He's more AJ Brown. He does, and he's a YOLO ball specialist. I mean, he made Spencer Rattler right when he shouldn't have been.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt.
Yeah,
I like Keon Coleman. I like him a lot. But yeah, definitely take a wide receiver in the first round. We talked about getting Josh Allen weapons. Get him an outside receiver, a guy that is going to be a wide receiver one. Yeah. So that's my first wish.
Completely agree.
Guy to resign. I really had a tough time with this because I wanted two guys really in this mix, and they're both defensive linemen. One just happens to be an interior guy. The other is an edge rusher. And I think when you look at the age of our current edge rushers, Leonard Floyd had his best season as a pro with us with 10.5 sacks. But he's 31 years old. Von Miller, we're not getting out of that contract, unfortunately. And actually, it was crazy because he probably played the best out of all defensive linemen in that last game against the Chiefs. But I had a hard time with this because I love Daquan Jones, and we only have one defensive tackle under contract next year, and that's Ed Oliver. But I'm willing to, if we absolutely have to, I'm willing to go cheap labor and maybe draft. This is another draft pick. I shouldn't be saying this, but I do want to draft a guy like Mason Smith or Devondre Sweat in the second round. Just a mammoth of a human being. So we can maybe do that. I think as far as an edge rusher goes, a guy like AJ Epinesa needs to stay with this team. So that's my choice to re-sign a guy. I looked at his market value is around $5.6 million a year. They're saying like 2 years, $11.7 million or something like that. So I would be good with that. I think AJ Epinesa is a guy that's a very good splash player for us right now. But you give him an opportunity to eventually work into that starting defensive end spot and stay on the field longer than 50% of the time, he could be a player in this league. He had 6.5 sacks this year. Talk about a get off. This guy's right up there with Bryce Huff, Anthony. Fast get off the ball. He makes plays in big moments. I think he's got a ton of potential, and it hasn't quite even been cracked yet. I think he's a very good player and a guy that we can still get at a reasonable deal to re-sign him. So that's my guy to re-sign. As far as a guy to target in free agency, again, I mentioned we're in cap hell right now, but the number one thing going into this offseason too, outside of solidifying some positions on defense, get Josh Allen weapons. So I looked at some of the wide receivers that are free agents this year, and Donovan Peoples-Jones is a guy that we could probably get on a bargain. This is a dude that is a year removed from having his best season as a pro. He caught 61 balls for 839 yards in 2022 with the Cleveland Browns. Now, he did end up going to Detroit this year, kind of fell off a little bit, but there's so many receivers in that wide receiver room. It's kind of tough to get playing time there. This is a dude that's got size. He's 6'2", 204. He can run. He's young. He's only going to be 25 this year. And I feel like he'd be a nice addition for the Bills. So another weapon for Josh Allen, Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's my pick.
Yeah, he seems like a really bad fit for Detroit because Goff is not like the downfield guy.
No, not at all. Not at all.
It seems like a weird choice for him because he was a free agent to go there.
Right. Well, I think they traded him, or the Browns released him or traded him. It was a trade, I think, mid-season.
Okay. It's just a weird matchup to me. Goff doesn't go downfield, and DPR runs fast.
Right. Yeah. So, no, I mean, it would. I think it'd be a good move for the Bills. So,
are you guys bringing back Gabe or no?
So Mike and I talked about this. It has to be the right price. Gabe Davis actually played like when he was healthy. Out of any receiver on the team, he was the guy that stayed on the field basically every single play in the game. I mean, even Steph Diggs was coming off the field a lot. Gabe Davis was in because he could block. And I think if we do have Gabe Davis in that Chiefs game, I'll admit he catches one of those 2 passes that Trent Sherfield drops. So Gabe is big in some moments, but also big in a negative way in some moments for us. He's a 50-50 guy. He is very similar to a guy like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, has the size, can get downfield, makes incredible catches at these crazy moments, but then he'll drop the easiest pass in the world. And it's frustrating because I feel like we've seen the side of Gabe Davis that scores 4 touchdowns and goes off in the playoffs against the Chiefs. And we're just praying for that Gabe to return. And it does happen every once in a while. And then he'll go for 0 for 0. he'll catch, 8 passes for 100 yards and then catch 0 for 0 yards, and then he'll be null again. And you can't have that as a number 2. So I think for the right price, if it's like $3 million or under, I'd be good with it. I think right now he didn't do himself any favors in free agency coming off the season that he had. So there is a chance that maybe we get him at a bargain. And I know he wants to stay in Buffalo ideally, but he is going to test the free agent market. So that's my answer on that. It's kind of a roundabout answer, but I think for the right price, Anthony, I'd be okay with bringing him back.
I think 1 for 3 is going to be way underneath his market.
I agree. I think, I said to Mike, I would even be okay with like 3 for 12 if it got to that point.
I still think
and I don't know if that's going to be, it's probably not going to be in line. Right.
Yeah, I think he's still going to get probably closer to like 10 or 11 million, because in a world where
he probably will.
Kirk gets 19, Christian Kirk gets 19.
Odell Beckham got 13, right? Like
Beckham got 13.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 4 for 48 or something like that.
Yeah, you're looking for Robbie Chosen at 3 for 12.
Crazy? Wow.
Yeah, you're looking for a guy that's like, pop gun, like he can go off occasionally. You're not getting much for 3 for 12 these days. I think Braxton Berrios got more than that from the Jets.
Yeah.
And then they cut him the next year. So.
And it's funny. I looked at Donovan Peoples-Jones, and I think his market value is only like $2.5 million, which is so weird. I mean, he's a young receiver. He's got good size. Like that to me was very surprising.
But he has like 0 production in his career, whereas Gabe at least has like consistently 800, 900 yards every year.
That's a good point.
Anyway, we're going over, and I'm sure we're boring these people to death on the Gabe Davis talk. Sorry.
Yeah. Keith, I know you got to get to work, so I'm going to end it off here. Fellas, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you to everyone in the chat. We appreciate all the input. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe to our channel. We do this every Tuesday night from 8 p.m. onwards. You just never know where we're going to go, what direction we're going to go in. Next week, you don't want to miss the show. We will have Chris hopefully on to represent his Pats as well. We are doing some trivia, and this is going to be fun, guys. I'm going to be hosting, and Keith, you're coming to reclaim the crown. So it's going to be a good one, fellas, and I'm very excited for it. Again, thank you all for watching. Appreciate you guys. Have a great night. Go Bills.
Go Fins.
Jets up.
Take care, guys.